have a particular religion or anything?
I was raised Buddhist. But
Religion?
Yeah, I practice Buddhism.
Oh, Buddhism.
I grew up in a Buddhist store.
Hi again. The reason I made this video is because first of all, there's not much out there in the YouTube world. And somebody even say, I never met a Buddhist, but this is what I'd say. Thanks for your honesty, but still, come on. First, let me say from experience, there's a big difference between evangelizing to a Buddhist in America versus a Buddhist in Asia. It's easier in America. There's a few reasons for that, but I'm not going to discuss that here. But let me just say, if you look up Buddhism in Wikipedia or somewhere online and you talk to a Buddhist in Asia, they'll say, but I don't believe that. And I was talking to a Buddhist monk in Vietnam. So let me focus this video on how to evangelize to a Buddhist in America. But it does apply to all Buddhists, in a way, although not all Buddhists believe the same things. You believe in reincarnation?
Well, this sort of Buddhism, not necessarily. It's more like if you want to believe in reincarnation, go ahead, but it's not like in a strict sense.
That's why on my Uber videos, you see me listening to what they say they believe, instead of assuming I know what they believe. I don't interrupt them. Oh, you're a Catholic? Catholics don't believe that. And especially when it comes to New Age Buddhism, they believe in all sorts of things about reincarnation that wasn't taught by Buddha. I know, because I studied Buddhism in Asia. So here are some real-world tips on how to evangelize to a Buddhist in America. Number one, culture. Buddhists in Asia have this misconception that Christianity is a Western, white man's religion. So I tell them, no, Christianity started in the East, the Middle East. The first Christians were Eastern, not a Western, white man's religion. And I think we can all agree that religion is not about race, it's about a search for truth. And usually if I meet a Buddhist who's not open to Christianity, usually he's Asian. And it's usually because of culture. He doesn't want to leave the Asian religion. So use Buddha as an example. Buddha was criticized by his family and friends for leaving Hinduism. In order to pursue the truth, he was willing to leave his family and cultural beliefs behind. So ask them, are you willing to pursue the truth regardless of family or cultural upbringing?
I don't personally have a specific God.
We don't pray to a higher being.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we don't pray to like a god.
Number two, God. Buddhists don't believe in a personal God. So it doesn't make sense to them when you say that Jesus was the Son of God.
Son of God in the same way that every other man, woman, and child is the Son of God.
Okay. So before you blurt out, God loves you, you have to first define God in the Christian point of view, emphasizing that he's a real person, not like the Buddhist force of the universe. Admit as the force in the universe.
Yeah.
I think that's how Star Wars got the force.
Haha, that's amazing.
It was really into Zen Buddhism. Actually.
Yeah. That's super cool. And I like that word actually. And I think that that comes pretty close to how I would.
So this force / God doesn't have a personal will, but there is a certain direction or meaning. But
yes.
It's not like a real person, like saying this or that. Or
Right,
deciding.
Exactly.
I believe that God is there for me, that he's a real person, that he is the God.
See, I don't necessarily know if I think that God is a person.
American Buddhists like to talk about the universe wants this or that, and they may even agree with your nomenclature of God, but it's still more like a force than a person. So make it clear, God is the creator, person. Okay?
The universe, like providing your perfect match. He's really it.
So you believe in fate. What about God? And I say this to anyone who doesn't believe in God. Because I believe that everybody, even atheists, I believe that everybody deep down inside knows that there's a God, that there's a higher being. Start with some things we have in common. God exists forever. Instead of calling him the Son of God, call him the perfect embodiment of God. God came down to earth as a man. Call Jesus a very wise man. Talk about his sermons on the Mount. Call Jesus the Prince of Peace. Buddhists love peace. God is love. We are called to love one another. Tell them we also like to meditate, except we meditate on the Word of God. Number 3, suffering is a huge theme in Buddhism. Buddhists are very concerned with pain and suffering in this world. So it's weird when you say that salvation comes from Jesus dying on the cross. I mean, you still have to talk about that. Just don't start with that. Start with Jesus coming to bring an end to suffering. He takes people out of bondage and captivity. Buddha taught that suffering is caused by things and people. So suffering will stop when a person gets rid of all these desires. So ask this to confirm their belief. Is desire the root of all suffering? And they'll be like, yes. Then ask, don't you desire enlightenment? And they'll be like, nice try, but we know this joke. They'll clarify, detach from earthly desires. Okay, then ask, all right, then how far do I detach? What about the desire to have a good job? What about the desire to raise a good family or the desire to help people? Do I have to extinguish my desire for my family? The correct answer is yes. That's why some people become monks and live in a monastery like this one. American Buddhists will say, I don't know, because they don't want to admit yes. Or they'll say, oh, nobody knows. The Dalai Lama desires to free Tibet. Is he also trying not to desire to free Tibet? Tell me what makes more sense. When you're suffering, to try to detach from desires? Or when you're suffering, seek comfort for that pain? What's working for you is that Buddhists already know this. Actually, everybody knows this truth deep inside. When you're suffering, you want help from a stronger being. You're not trying to kill your desire for help. You know this. Pray that they will admit this. Number 4, sin. It doesn't matter when you say Jesus forgives your sin, because Buddhists aren't concerned or worried about sin or judgment. Buddhists care more about social issues rather than spiritual issues like sin. Instead of seeing Christians protesting against sin, they would rather see Christians in action, helping the poor, protecting the outcast, lifting burdens. They care more about tangible needs. And so the next time you help out at the soup kitchen or the homeless shelter, invite your Buddhist friend. He would love to help. And he would love to see Christians in action. They will open him up to the gospel.
I feel like you should live your life with what makes you happy, as long as it doesn't harm you.
My purpose in life is to be a happy person and to be a good person.
Buddhists are more concerned about happiness, not about sin. So talk about how Christianity offers purpose and meaning, and how finding purpose leads to happiness. Talk about how God is a happy God who offers happiness to his people. And sin is also related to
karma. Karma's gonna get you anyways.
So you believe in karma, so if you're
Absolutely.
good things will happen to you. If you're bad things will happen to you.
Yeah.
There's an automatic balance. So this naturally leads to a discussion of reincarnation. By the way, don't ask for proof. Whenever I ask for proof, they always tell me about some vision or memory or lie they had about being some warrior or princess in a past life.
Like, I've been through many lives.
Oh, you have?
Like, I was a guy in a past life. I was a warrior.
I was like an Indian princess.
Really? All of you? No memory of being a peasant or a commoner? Everyone was someone famous or important? When talking about karma, I always ask them whether it's karma when certain tragedy strikes. Was it karma for the Jews to be killed by the Nazis? Was it karma for that little boy to die? When they say yes or I don't know, it makes them rethink whether karma makes sense, because deep down inside, they know it's not justice. This works better in Asia than in America. In this next clip, the American didn't take the bait.
People going into schools and shooting people up. Like, what the hell? You know what I mean?
So the people who were shot, was that karma then?
No. Sometimes people are in the wrong place at the wrong time. And
Anyway, when talking about reincarnation, and based on what kind of reincarnation they believe in, ask them this: how much sacrifice and how many lives would be enough before you can be perfect, like God? Maybe in the next life, you can become like one of these monks. And these monks, are they close to perfection? Detached from these desires? Are they almost perfect? And the answer is no. It's impossible. It doesn't matter how many sacrifices, how many lives it takes. You can never be perfect like God. Romans 3:23, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So when you tell them Romans 3:23, it's not some great revelation. It's just the confirmation of the truth that God placed in every human being. Speaking of truth, number 5, truth. For all Buddhists, truth is relative. What do you think about religions like Buddhism, not Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, all those other religions?
Well, I mean, I believe that in their own ways they're right for each person.
So it's all about how it makes you feel?
Yeah, in a sense, yes.
I believe what the Bible says, but
You believe what the Bible says. The Bible says you go to heaven or hell.
yeah.
Okay. So technically, you could, depends what you visualize what heaven or hell is. I believe Buddha. I also believe in Jesus too.
You believe in Jesus too? Even if statements are contradictory or even proved to be wrong, it's not as important as how those statements, teachings, help you to live your life. So when you say that Jesus is the truth, or claim to be the truth, or taught the truth, it's not as important as how those teachings help you to live your life. Now this might seem like a huge negative, but it's actually a huge positive because testimony counts a lot more than truth. But hypothetically, if there was a personal God and he wanted to let people know certain truths, whether it's Bible or Islam, Quran or whatever,
Yeah.
how would he get that across?
Well,
I mean, how would he get that across to you? Because you don't totally trust what people say. I mean, even if someone died and went to heaven and came back, I mean, how can you really trust him?
yeah, I mean, I think that now I say that having not ever having that type of conversation with someone who could make such a claim. I feel like if I had a personal and deep conversation with someone with such a claim, I would not discount that.
For Buddhists, faith is more relational.
I don't think strongly that God doesn't exist.
Oh, okay.
I think that I would put that on the list of things that I would very easily be arguable for me. Especially if I was to have any type of profound conversation with someone who could, attest to any type of experience they've had or this and that.
So it's not all knowledge-based, knowing all the facts about God. Show them what it's like to have a relationship with God, what it's like to follow Jesus, and the experiences you have. Talk about those stories and those testimonies. Tell them about how much God helps you to live your life. Of course, more than that too. Now, if you want to go on the offensive, do this. Buddhists believe in the yin-yang of Taoism. And I'm not going to explain all that in this short video. But the universe is made of opposite elements. Light and dark, black and white, cold and hot, male and female. You can't have one without the other. So the logical conclusion is that Buddhists believe evil must exist. So ask them, is evil a necessity for good to exist? Be specific. Murder, rape, terrorism. Is that really necessary? And most American Buddhists will say, no, evil is not a necessity. And they'll say, you're misunderstanding things. Well then bring in Taoism. Doesn't opposites exist because the universe exists? Well, isn't good and evil opposites? That's when they say that truth is relative, that good and evil is fluid. Then say this, if truth is relative, is there a difference between good and evil? If they say no, then say this, if good and evil is just a perception, then karma doesn't exist, because karma is about doing good versus doing evil. And if there's no karma, there's no reincarnation and no salvation for the Buddhists. If they say yes, there's a difference, then truth is not relative, it's absolute. There is a standard. And who determines these standards? It's not my standards or the standards of the predominant culture. It's the standards of the higher power, God. Now, from experience, no one is always subjective. You can't be consistently subjective. No one is absolutely subjective, if you know what I mean. They have to admit eventually that there is a standard of good and evil. I often use Hitler or Muslim terrorists as examples of evil because everybody agrees they're evil. So I try to lead to this conclusion. Well, my point is, I think these standards that we have on what is right and wrong come from God, and that it's not based on what everybody else thinks.
How about yourself? What's your kind of religious preference?
I'm Christian. I'm a Christian.
Okay.
I believe that Jesus is the Son of God, so I do believe in a personal God.
Mm-hmm.
That He came to forgive sins. So I don't believe that you get to heaven by being a good person, but I believe that it comes from a relationship with God, which comes through Jesus. I mean, I believe in Jesus Christ, that he's the only way to heaven. And it's not about if you're good or evil, because I believe no one's really good enough for heaven.
No,
so you have
100%. You're always kind of working towards trying to reach that point, but it's never attainable perfection.
Right, no one's really good. No one can reach that level of goodness for heaven. I do try to be a good person too. But for me, my motivation isn't about trying to get closer to perfection or heaven. It's because I know God has forgiven me because of what Christ did for me on the cross. So because I'm already going to heaven, because I'm already his child, I want to live in a way that gives him, that honors him.
Honors him, 100%.
I hope this video was helpful. Even if you don't meet a Buddhist, there's a lot of New Age Buddhist thinking out there. So examine the 5 categories and let's take the gospel to real people who need to hear the real path to salvation. Don't forget to subscribe and click on that bell so you know when the next video is up. And until then, check out these other videos.